Um, so welcome everybody. Thank you very much for joining the call tonight. My name is Christian McNeil, and I'm a Three Principles coach and practitioner here in Glasgow. And tonight I'm really delighted to be in conversation with our guest for this month, Marsha Madigan. And we also have Lynn Robertson and Marie McQuaid joining us shortly. Lynn's here just now, and Marie McQuaid's joining us shortly. And this is really a departure from the usual monthly conversations, which are live and are open to all sorts of different participants, because the way that I came across you, Marsha, it was rather different than how I've encountered some of our other guests. And I really liked something that you'd written on Facebook, and I can't even remember what that was now, but I liked it enough to reach out to you and ask if you'd be up for a conversation. And after some toing and froing, we had that conversation, and it was fascinating to me when you started to talk about, although you and I'm sure you'll say more about this yourself, but although you have this long history of being a teacher of the Three Principles, that your own life had also been touched deeply by something called human design. And I hadn't heard of that at all, and I was a little skeptical perhaps, until you told me some things about myself that were just incredibly accurate and incredibly helpful. And I can't remember when that conversation took place, maybe about a month ago, but it's been such an extraordinary summer following that conversation. And I would say that some of the ideas and the principles of human design that you've pointed me towards have been incredibly helpful to me in the way of some of the other big leaps forward, as it were, that I've had since I discovered the principles. And in fact, the first time I discovered the principles themselves, that was just a massive kind of shift, a big insight, a big change. So I've been really enthusiastic about what you've shared with me, and I've been talking to other people about it, including Lynn and Marie, and so it's really wonderful to have the opportunity to hear from you a bit more, and I know you're going to talk to the others on the call. And so I would just like to perhaps at this point hand it over to you, Marsha. And I've obviously heard something of your history, but the others haven't, and it'd be just lovely to hear some of your experience, your life experience, and both with the principles and also more particularly for the purpose of this call, how you came across human design.
Well, thank you, Christian. That's a lot. I could talk for 2 hours, but I won't. I won't. So we'll see. So I was a practicing physician and hospital executive in the mid-90s. And I ran across George Pransky and Judy Sedgman and Dick and Bettinger and Keith and Valda up in O'Connor, because I was involved in a leadership development program as a senior executive. We brought people into the hospital to teach. And the people we brought in were from Sen Delaney and Long Beach. And when we brought them in, I said, "Oh my gosh, you guys have a totally different approach. Where did that come from?" And they said, "The Pransky people in O'Connor." So I went up to O'Connor and worked with them and did a business externship with those guys in '97. So it's quite a while ago. And and during that time, I met Sid, of course, and ended up being on the board of the Equanimitas Foundation, which was the organization that was bringing at the time Sid's work into the world, so to speak. And so, I was teaching and doing all the stuff with the Three Principles. It wasn't called that back then, but that's okay. and then in 2001, I was actually teaching at the Fetzer Institute in Kalamazoo, Michigan. I was doing some retreats with medical executives and hospital executives based on mind, consciousness, and thought and the Three Principles. And I had we will call it not an accident, but a car crash. I was involved in a car crash and had some very serious injuries that were basically life-threatening. I had to recover from those, and it took, oh gosh, 2 or 3 years of intense therapy to get past that. And what I discovered was that the principles weren't really helping me. So I was talking to my buddies, my co-teaching faculty that I've been teaching with, and people were saying, oh, well, now you'll be able to not pay so much attention to thought, now you'll be able to be more in a quiet mind and all this stuff. But I didn't find that personally was happening for me. It was absolutely the opposite. And so I explored a lot of different things at that time over those early 2000s, and I came across human design as let's call it a discipline or a tool or something in 2008. And it told me some things, like you said, Christian, it told me some things about myself that I had had no idea about. And it has to do with the energetic movement of this illusory body, this vehicle, this form, which we all know. I mean, if you're in the 3 principles, you know that we're in a dream, we're in an illusion, where basically we're kind of like a video character in a dream. And yet we do have certain characteristics that make us able to move in certain ways and not in other ways effectively. So what I realized I had been doing was trying to use my mind to get out of my thinking, if that makes any sense. So I was constantly caught in this loop of judging my thinking, of trying to be nice and trying to be positive and looking for the next thought, and I'm only one thought away, and all this stuff, which was all pulling me into a mental process. And I wasn't in touch with my inner felt perception as my guidance system. So in the 3 principles, we talk about wisdom, and we talk about we all have access to this wisdom. Well, the problem with that word wisdom is it makes it sound like it comes in words. So it makes it sound like you are waiting for the next thought or the next insight to guide you in the next direction. Well, that has not been my experience personally, nor has it been for many people that I know. What I learned through human design is how my energy works, how my aura works, it's not me personally, it's not Marsha's energy or Marsha's aura, it's this little spaceship that hello Marie, I'm Marsha. It's this little spaceship that each of us is traveling in, and it's a collection of energetic patterns. So in the energy of all things, this water glass shows up because it's a collection of energetic patterns presenting as a water glass with water in it. Well, this is a collection of energetic patterns presenting as Marsha, and then we've got Christian, and then we've got Lynn, and we've got Marie, and everybody else. And yes, it's all the energy of all things. Absolutely, it's all the energy of all things. But my husband just was making a little noise and walked out the door and got in the car. Well, he got in a car and he drove away. I mean, you have to have different energetic frequencies operating in order for things to appear separate in the dream, in relativity. So I don't know where. Well, Christian, could you say anything about any one thing that you noticed? And then maybe I'll try to see if I could say something about any one thing that I noticed by this. That's where I'm going with this.
Sure, certainly. So, one of the things, I don't know quite how we got onto it, but one of the things that you said something about invisible thinking, and that kind of got my attention because
unconscious. Yes.
Unconscious thinking, yeah. So but perhaps even more before that, I think that one of the things that was incredibly helpful was this idea that essentially, as I understand it, there are 4 or maybe 5 different types of energetic beings, and
Human
and
being.
and I suppose for anybody listening to this, that this is the starting place of how you find this out. It starts with your date and time of place, date and time of birth. Is that right? And
That's right, but it isn't, people go, oh, that must be astrology. No, it's not astrology. It does have something to do with the planets, but it has to do with the physical imprint of the planet. So it's not predictive like astrology says. Oh, you're going to meet a tall, dark, and handsome guy next week walking down the street. No, it's not like that is not what it is. Yes.
So the bit it turned out, as we discovered, that you and I have the same type, and that's a type that's a relatively small proportion of the population.
20%.
And I think Lynn, who's on the call, also is of that type. And
Yes.
how you described in very broad strokes was just so accurate to me, and I saw that it wasn't a suggestion of something to do going forward, but it's a way that life had always kind of worked for me,
Yes.
and particularly that thing of almost acting on opportunities that came my way, and how those could be incredibly successful, but the sort of daily grind wasn't so much my bag. So that, or to put it another way, where we kind of live in a culture of, where it's basically of, if you work hard and apply yourself, you'll get the results. But for our type, it appears not so much. It's not quite like that.
It's actually not true for anybody. It's a big myth. But everybody has a different way of entering into the stream of flow of their energy, the effortless flow of their energy. Every type has a different way of responding to life. Let's put it that way. Life is flowing through us, and we're either aligned with it or we're trying to go in another direction and meeting resistance. So, but nobody's really here to grind away at things that are not fun. That isn't the deal on this planet. But we that's a myth that we believe. So, anything else occur to you right now, or?
Well, when you, because as I heard you explain my type, our type, it was that really the how to align with it was almost to wait for an invitation, and
Right.
and to respond to that invitation, and in doing that things could blossom, and
Right.
whereas trying to sort of force something through myself wouldn't work. And what struck me as particularly true is, since I got into this work, and left law and set up a business as a coach and trainer, I had been trying to do an awful lot of forcing things. I mean, it seemed like sensible initiatives, it seemed like good ideas, it seemed to be working for other people, and it wasn't particular, and all that felt like pretty hard work with relatively limited returns, if you like.
Right. No, that's a really good example. I see so many coaches, because I wanted to add one more thing. So I worked with the Pransky group, and then I decided to reconnect with the 3 principles in 2016, because I really wanted to see, I knew there was some commonality between human design and the 3 principles. And I had been studying human design and became a certified human design analyst in 2014. But I kept thinking there is something that is connecting this stuff, and I am missing what the point is. So I went and did a professional retreat weekend with the Pransky people, and met a bunch of people up there, and came away thinking, God, the 3 principles is really missing this piece, but I can't see how to connect the 2 things. So then I went out and spent a weekend in a retreat with Michael at his home in California. I think there were 5 or 6 of us there. And I came back from that and I thought, oh, there's still I cannot connect these pieces. And then I went out and did a week with Jamie Smart in England, and also did his 3-month coaching package program. And there you go, Christian. That's where I saw all these people that were working on their websites and working on their marketing and working on all these things. Oh, and for me, it was all of the peer coaching calls that I had to do in that coaching program, which I did. And I met some lovely people and I really enjoyed it, but it was a total energy drain for me. People would say to me, oh, that was the most helpful call I've ever had in my life. I just loved it. And it didn't lead to anything because there was no life force energy behind it. And I didn't have the energy. So I was trying to force it, like you were saying. And what I've seen now is when things come to me, then it's an entirely different, it's like life bringing me something on a gold platter with, here, would you like this? And then I can respond to that from my felt perception in my body. And yes or no. And of course, I'm married. I've been married for 32 years. And part of the interesting thing about this is after 6 years of marriage, my husband and I got a divorce because I just couldn't stand to live my life as a busy executive and a mother of 2 kids plus a stepdaughter, plus my husband was a CEO and I was the wife of the CEO. So I did all that too. And at some point I just said, I can't do this anymore. And that is, in retrospect, where I was first starting to tune into what my frequency was and what I could do myself, how I needed to protect my own energy and to stand in my own power and my own space in order to interact with him. And then we went up, we did the Pransky weekend, the first weekend together. We were divorced at the time, but we did the first Pransky weekend together in 95. And we got married again in 96. And we've been married ever since. So it's a happy ending, and we have a wonderful relationship. But what really put the icing on the cake of our wonderful relationship is the human design understanding of our differences, of what is different between us, not of what is the same. We can talk a lot about what's the same. And the 3 principles is really focused on how everybody's believing their thoughts and they don't need to be. And that's true. Everybody's the same in that way. But how do you get out of believing your thoughts? How do you actually, what do you count on if you're not using your mental stories to guide your life? And how do you protect your own energy so that you're not getting conditioned constantly in a homogenized way by the people that are around you? Because that's what happens. It's a normal part of life is that, I'll just grab Christian, if I can just flash this up here, because it's what I have in front of me, is all these weight centers on this design are taking in the conditioning from other people. That's normal. It's not a bad thing. But if we're not aware of it, then we're living from that, which is not what we are, was not who we are. And the whole point, I think, of both the 3 principles and human design is to get to the point where you're living from that self that transcends everything. But it's like that absolute self has to surrender to the vehicle that it's in. So for instance, if I walk up to the roof of my 2-story house and I jump off, I'm going to break a leg because of gravity. I mean, we have to surrender to the laws of relativity that we're living in. And so we can be, as I was, in La La Land, living from the absolute, everything is perfect, and if I'm having a bad day, it must be me believing my thought, which was tripping me up all the time, versus, what have I not paid attention to here that, how's my energy feeling about this, because I need to pay attention to that rather than what my head is telling me. So I'll just give you a quick example of that, since what's interesting, because Jamie and Michael, for instance, are amazing teachers, and they're bringing wonderful things into the world, but they have a different design than Christian and Lynn and I do. Marie has a more similar design. So that just means that what works for them does not necessarily work for our energy. And it doesn't mean that we're any less than they are or any less capable. Once we learn how to ride the waves of our energy, we're infinitely capable, but it has to be differentiated. It has to be, how does this work for me? Not what are we saying across the board works for everybody else. For instance, the coaching call thing, the whole idea that just pick up the phone and call people and have conversations, and the more conversations you have, the better your coaching practice will be. And the more deep coaching you do for people initially, the more they will want to hire you. Well, that does not work for me. It just doesn't, because when I go deep with somebody, they really get so much out of it that they're kind of scratching their head and saying, well, I don't really need a coach. They don't need a coach. That's my whole thing. They don't need a coach. So how am I supposed to be getting coaching clients if people don't need coaches? I can support them to get their feet on the ground with their energy, and then they don't actually need a coach. So it's really amazing. I don't know what more. I mean, I could go on about this for a long time, but it's like, whoa, it's a whole different way of looking at life.
It's been lovely just listening to you tonight and hearing fresh things that I haven't heard before. But what you're reminding me of is that I absolutely saw the truth of that for myself, and for the first time, I think it had the effect of taking an enormous amount off my mind that I didn't know was there. And that was what I was referring to as the invisible thinking. Because since I'd got into this work, I had adopted a kind of idea, and it wasn't even fully conscious. It was just the idea of just get on with it. If you want to build a business, you have to do these things, and just as you were saying, the marketing, the coaching calls, the website, and all of that. And not that there's anything wrong with any of that, but what I saw, that it has always been the case for me, that it's like there's sort of magical moments of invitation or of possibility, and if I follow them, the outcome is hugely different than when I'm just trying to sort of do the right thing and work hard at it without that sense of inspiration or invitation.
Right. And it's because life is carrying you rather than you trying to carry the world on your shoulder. And that's what I did for my whole life. I was the perfect super slave, getting everything done, taking care of my family and my husband and my kids and my work and entertaining and blah, 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 whatever. We don't do that anymore. But yes, it's when you catch on to how your energy actually works. Another example might be, I like the dog show example. It's not perfect, but it's good enough that you have a Chihuahua and it has certain characteristics and it can do certain things. And you have a Saint Bernard and it has certain characteristics and it can do certain things, but they can't do the same things. And it's the same thing with a dog that is agility trained. There are some breeds that are great at agility training. And there are others that it just doesn't make any sense to even try to agility train that dog. But if you had the idea that all dogs were the same, which is what we're saying with the three principles, and yes, I know in the absolute sense, we are all the same. I have no doubt about that. I'm certain of it. And yet we have to live in this relative world somehow. So I have a little, just for fun, example. So it's easier for generators in this typing system. Generators and manifesting generators are about 70% of the population. And they have an easier time once they tune into their physical felt perception response to things, which is different than an emotional reaction. And it has to be separated out, because I am 100% in agreement with the single paradigm of thought that thoughts create emotions, and emotions, if we follow them, can get us in trouble. And that's not what we want to be following. That's correct. So we're not talking about emotional reactions, but we're talking about felt perceptions in the body. So I have a friend who's a manifesting generator, and she had a dog that had a bite by a wild animal, and she was panicked about it. She just threw the dog in the car. She didn't have her glasses for driving. She couldn't find her glasses. She threw the dog in the car and started on a 2-hour drive to the nearest urgent care for the vet at night. Okay, I think it was on a weekend too. And it just so happened that I called her while she was in the car. And she's telling me, I'm driving, I don't have my glasses, I can't see anything, but the dog, blah, 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 blah. The dog can't breathe, the dog this, the dog that. And I was listening to her and I thought, did you stop and ask yourself if to feel in your body your response, whether you felt to take the dog to the vet? Because your mind made up a story that the dog was having all these problems and that this was serious and that you needed to do something. And so I asked her, I said, do you feel you need to take the dog to the vet? And she stopped. Well, she's driving. And she said, no. No, I don't. And I'm like, okay, well, then maybe you'd be better off to go home and find your glasses and stay home and do what you need to do at home and watch the dog overnight. Then I said, if the dog dies overnight, are you going to be okay? And again, she waited, she listened to what her body said, and her body said, yeah, dogs die, things happen. Yes. Compared to driving 2 hours in a mountainous region without your glasses in the dark, it just doesn't add up. But had she gotten a yes, she would have still been driving, and I would have 100% supported her. But it was her body said yes, or her body said no. It was not her mental story about what she should do or shouldn't do, or what would happen if she did it or didn't do it, which is where we all get all tangled up in our heads. So this is the only way I know of to get distance from that. To truly get into a quiet mind is to not pay attention to those mental stories. Well, how do you not pay attention to them when that's all you've got? And that was my problem after I hit my head in the car crash. That was all I had to navigate by, was my mental stories, which were at that point like hyper screwed up because of what was going on with my nervous system. So it was just a mess. I don't know if that was a helpful example.
No, it really is, and I'm conscious. I've been asking all the questions. This is going to be my last one, and then I'm going, if you're up for it, going to hand it over to the others. But I just wanted to just ask you this about, when you're talking about this felt perception response in the body, would you say that is wisdom? That is how that is an example of wisdom coming through?
The reason I don't use that word anymore is because wisdom sounds like words. It sounds like, it sounds like you'd opened an encyclopedia and you found what you needed. And that it takes people right back into their heads. But yes, I would say the way Three Principles uses the word wisdom, or the way Sid was using it, and I spent a fair amount of time with Sid, so I heard him talk a lot on stage and off stage. I think that's how he was using the word wisdom. Absolutely, Christian. It was life. What was the word that he used? Mana, for sitting on the beach in Hawaii and absorbing the energy of life. He didn't call it that, but that's what he was talking about. He saw the energy. He saw the movement of energy. He saw how people were either grounded in their body or they were off in their head somewhere. And he was using the best words he could to try to explain it to people. And I'm not being critical of him, but then it's been taken by people who were primarily psychologists and turned into a type of psychology. Now it's getting turned into non-duality, which I've studied for 30 or 40 years, but it isn't any of that. None of that. And nobody's talking, very few people are talking about the form principle. So we have the principle of gravity. We've got the form principle, which is how the form is being moved through life. And do we want to line up with that? It's like a tuning fork. Do we want to tune into our frequency, or do we want to keep trying to go over here and do something else, like I was doing with all those coaching sessions I was doing that just didn't, they were great in the moment, but they didn't lead to anything because they weren't, life didn't even really invite me to go over and do those things with Jamie and Michael. I invited myself. And that's how it worked. It didn't work very well. And the same thing with the Pranskys. They didn't invite me to come up there. And see, I see that in retrospect, and a lot of what we see is in the rear view mirror. How did that work? And what could have been different? And there's no other way to see it other than you do the thing and you go, oh, well, I see, I skipped a step. I skipped the step of asking, was I invited? So anyway, okay, would you like, anybody else want to ask anything, or is that what you're thinking?
Yeah, I'm just conscious of it, sort of hogging it.
Yeah, we could talk for several hours about this.
Yeah.
And I had so many years of trying to understand what is going on with the three principles and what is the one thing that human design is bringing that isn't part of the three principles. And they're not in conflict at all, but how to explain that is an interesting challenge. So would one of you ladies like to ask anything or share anything, make a comment or anything?
Lynn has unmuted herself, and then I think Marie's waving. So Lynn, you're unmuted. You go ahead.
Yeah, please.
Shall I go ahead? Okay, then. Thank you, Marsha. This is, fascinating. And I kind of, just hearing your perspective and, what you kind of say about it. So I think we are the same type. Is that correct? So I am a
projector in the human design system, which is about 20% of the population. But you are a totally different kind of projector than Christian and I are. Everybody is so unique. So just in your situation, you have something that makes you a very powerful, you have a lot of willpower. And Christian and I don't have that thing, that willpower thing. So what works for you is different than what works for us, even though you're a projector, even though you do need to be invited into an opportunity that's good for you. So I don't know, I'm going on about something. Maybe that's not.
No, because I mean, my introduction just to kind of, and this is kind of why I have a fascination is, and I think I first came across human design maybe about a year ago. I was on a call with a friend and, just a kind of a Friday night kind of friend chat thing. And she had kind of come across human design and, we did my type and it was a bit of a kind of a laugh. And, she sent me over the little blurb and she was like, oh my God, that's so you. And we kind of read it and I'm like, oh, that is like me. That is like me. And, it was a kind of, like I say, a Friday night kind of, bit of a laugh thing. Because I love all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I've done my kind of, my Myers-Briggs profile, which I, again, found spookily accurate to describe me. And
yes.
But then a couple of months ago, I was on a coaching call with, a non-3P person. Again, I wanted some coaching just, again, with regards to my work. And I wanted, a kind of a different perspective.
Yes.
And kind of halfway through the call, and it was all about kind of, how to get the most out of, my role and, kind of, move, just perform better in my role. And halfway through the call, she kind of stopped dead and she went, wait a minute, can we do something? I'm going to ask you some strange questions. And I'm like, okay. So she's asked for my date of birth and So it turned out that she had the exact same profile as me. So again, it was a projector. She was a 5/1. And she's like, listening to you was like listening to myself. Yes. And so then we had a fascinating conversation about that. And I kind of, was really taken by the fact that in conversations about how I do my work, how I work to deadlines, how I, create results in the world and how I do things and how I lose my energy and what sucks me and, what drives me.
Right.
She was able to just recognize me, in such a powerful way. So then that's kind of what opened up my fascination with human design. And so I suppose, my general questions, because obviously Christian and I have been having lots of fascinating conversations over the last couple of weeks about that. But I can see that the differences between Christian and I, although we are the same type, I can see that the things that work for her are not necessarily that work for me. So I don't know, could you maybe speak to what you've seen in my chart or my profile?
Well, I didn't go into any great detail, but the thing that jumps out at me with Christian and I both have a fourth line in our profile in human design, and that's an opportunistic networker. We're very interested in getting out what we see. We want to connect what we see to other people. But you don't have that. Mm. And neither does Marie. And so so we have this need to opportunistically network what's worked for us with in groups and with other people. But with you, people can project on you. It's a 5-1 profile. It's like people look at you and they go, oh, she's going to save us. She's the one. She's going to save us. They turn you into the savior. And then they can be disappointed very quickly. And it's nothing to do with you. It's your vehicle. It's what they're seeing. It's your costume. So it's not who you really are. But people, my stepdaughter is a 5-1. And people look at her and they go, oh, man, we're going to hire her for this big executive international position. She's 37 years old, and we're going to have her do all this stuff. And then she does it, and they're, I'm not sure that's what we want. It's just a joke. We're in a cosmic joke. So we have to find out, what is it that, are we a Chihuahua or a St. Bernard? I mean, we can still win the dog show. It's not about that we can't do our job. But what is our job? What is it really? So, or maybe a better example is a cat, and my cats are, totally different than a dog, but they're being themselves. So it's all about being yourself. So as far as the thing that jumped out at me particularly is that channel that you have between the ego center and can I flash this up here real quick?
Yeah, of course.
Just so the audience can see this, the channel that's colored in right here. Yeah. This is so high tech. That between the ego center and the spleen, which is the channel of the transmitter, which is all about the material world and selling things, marketing. Yeah, I mean, you're very talented at that, and as you should be. It's not. It's none of this is good or bad. It's just what you're designed to be doing. And there's quite a bit of depth in here that I would have to look and see what particular line you have and the colors. And there's a lot of stuff that isn't right here in this chart, in order to really try to help you see, oh, well, that's why these things work and those things don't. So I could focus on these things and just let those go, because it's the old 80-20 rule, right? You want to be focusing on the 20% of what works for you and skip the 80%. Just forget about it. It's just not going to help you. So that's that. I was a kind of an efficiency expert when I was a physician. I was involved in quality improvement and accreditation and all sorts of things. So I'm all about continuous improvement. How can we target something that works better and better and better? So this appealed to me for that. So I don't know, did that answer your question?
Yeah, no, it did. And I think, one of the things, and again, I haven't delved into it really deeply, but one of the kind of, again, I kind of like what you said about, and again, these are just my words, but, sometimes, with your understanding of the principles, you can principle yourself, right? So again, for me, I've always been aware of my need to retreat, for want of a better expression. And I've always been really aware of that. Like, sometimes it's just like, oh no, my sanctuary is my sanctuary, just with me. And it's like, the world is very noisy and very busy and I need my space. But when I came across the principles, again, I kind of, I could hear well, I should be at home anyway.
It's only thought. It's just thought. You shouldn't feel like that. That's what happened to me.
So in that circumstance in particular, you know, I would feel, like you say, my knowing. So my word for wisdom, you know, whatever, you know, that's just, I call it my knowing. Is for me, my knowing was always so strong of when I needed to just have my space.
Yes.
But I could hear then, but I mean, I know the principles. So, you know, I can be in a room with 50 people. I can be away from my sanctuary, my little respite of the world.
Exactly.
And when I kind of started to understand my human design profile, that was really prevalent in mine.
Yes. And it also might be that I'm in my environment in human design, I'm a cave person, and you might be also, which is very selective. It means only certain people get into my cave.
Yeah, that would be exactly me. Yes.
And I'm sitting here in a room that is 30 feet by 40 feet because we bought a house so that I could have retreats in my house. Mm-hmm. Well, now, as a cave person, does that really make any sense to have 30 people come into my house on a regular basis? No, but I'm sitting in this big room. You know, I mean, it's that kind of, it's just unbelievable. When you get down to the bottom of this, you go, oh, that's why it didn't work.
Well, and I think for me, and then we'll see what Marie's got to say, but, you know, I think that was one of, you know, like, as Christian has said, that kind of sense of relief.
Yes.
Is for me that kind of almost my sense of relief in seeing the tiny bits I have seen about my profile have been that my knowing wasn't wrong.
Right. It's never wrong.
Those kind of senses and urges were not quirks of my personality that I needed to see through and have a different experience of.
Right.
They're just actually how exactly what you say. I kind of love the way you describe it because it's kind of how I see the principles. It's how life lives me.
Yes.
And I actually really know how life lives me. And this has just kind of solidified that in another way for me.
Yes. It's how you are. Everything is a gift of life. Everything is wonderful, but it comes in the package that's suited for you. It's not, it doesn't work for everybody. Your energetic circuit board is only wired a certain way. So it's it's almost like a puzzle. Like certain puzzle pieces fit in with other puzzle pieces because they're shaped a certain way. I mean, you can't say, well, it's just a puzzle. Let's throw all the pieces together and they're all the same. It doesn't work that. It just doesn't work. So that's an interesting, I'm glad you brought that up about the needing your sanctuary and what it is you've got a huge amount of open centers in your design, which is the way you're built and you're meant to be that way. But it means you take in the conditioning from the people that you're around. So you need to clear that out. You do need to clear it out. And it clears out, you don't do anything. You just stay in your little 16-foot bubble long enough for it to clear out. It goes away.
And it is like, you know, I could, you know, all my life I've always said that. It's kind of like, you know, I feel like when I know that feeling in myself so strongly, like, oh, enough. Let me go back to myself. And then I can almost hear myself verbatim say, oh, I've come back to life.
Yes, that's right. And you know what's so
like
interesting?
That for me.
We all have that. But for me, as in my life, I had tuned that out because I was trained as a physician, meaning that you pay no attention to yourself. You're 100% focused on what does the other person need. So I never paid any attention to all those feelings that I was having. And then the 3 principles was another one. Oh no, those are just thoughts. You don't have to believe those. Well, it wasn't. We're talking about felt perception. We're talking about your knowing, which is a totally different thing. And Marie, I know we don't have a lot of time, but actually I'm interested in what you have to say because you have a really deep knowing about things and it doesn't come in words. So I'm curious if it's okay, if you want to say anything, what were you wanting to talk about?
Hi everyone, I'm really sorry I was late. I couldn't get the fucking internet to work. I was going around the house with my computer trying to find the spot, and I'm in my bedroom now. I was really attracted to this from hearing from Christian, and then I looked at my profile, and I love the idea that that basically I can generate a lot, which I know, but as I'm manifesting and generating, the thing that's really important is to make sure I plug in properly to that sense of knowing that you've mentioned.
Yes, which is it the right thing to be doing? You can get stuff done, but if it wasn't the right thing to start with, like my friend in the car, I
think that is a bit of a challenge, I would say, for me. I'd say a lot of what I've generated is really amazing, and then a lot is a lot of generated stuff, and then sometimes the more that's generated, the more packed everything can be.
Yes.
So I'm just interested in what like Lynn was asking, just what you see when you see my.
Well, you the difference between these charts is amazing, and we're all different. But just look at the colors. I mean, just look at the parts that are colored in and the parts that are, which way do I need to go? This way. You have a lot of energy definition in the human design way of looking at the circuit board, and it works in a certain way. And one of the things that you've got is a thought must become a deed. Okay. So you have a thought about something. I'm not saying you personally. People with this design can have a thought about something, like my friend jumping in the car and driving down at 70 miles an hour down the mountain without her glasses because she thought the dog needed help. But she didn't stop to say, do I need to make this trip? And wait for the response to arise. So you have that same type of energy that she does. So you can get stuff done, and you can just get a ton of stuff done. But the catch is to only be doing the 20% of the stuff that gives you the 80% of the results. And the way that you know that is you're in the 50% of the population that has emotional authority, which sounds like you're following your emotions, but actually the 3 principles is wonderful for people that have emotional authority because it says wait for clarity. Wait until your emotional reaction is over. Wait to just see what you just seems obvious to walk towards. So when it's obvious to you that you can walk through that open door, it's like just get up, your body just gets up out of the chair and walks through the open door. That's when you know it's right for you. But it's not right for you when you're like, oh, I can't wait to do this thing because it's going to be so wonderful. Or, oh, I hate that. I don't want anything to do with it. Those things are not going to be, that isn't helping. And I'm making a joke out of this. This is 50% of the population has that tendency to go towards things that sound so exciting and wonderful and then find out later, well, how did that work out? Well, not so great. Because they didn't wait for the calm to guide them in, and that is their knowing, is the calm. So for a person like you, it's hard because you have so much energy. For the other 3 of us, we're not constantly being pulled other than by the world, which says you should be doing stuff that you're not, but that's a mental thing, But you've got the energy to do stuff, but you really only want to use it when you might want to sit on the couch for a week before you're actually moved to get out of a chair and go do something. And that's how you know. Maybe it won't take a week, but you know what I mean. That's how you know that that's the thing for you to do. So I don't know, Kristen, how are we doing here? What are we?
What's interesting to me is because you have never met Marie or Lynn before and know nothing about them and how accurate you are.
That's right. I know nothing about them other than I know everything about them.
Yeah, but it's just...
But I don't know anything about... I know 2 things. I know we're all the same in an absolute sense. So I, like any other 3 principles person, can know that about people. I can choose not to focus on the problems. I can focus on solutions. But so we all have that in common. And I can see the differentiation and what the natural gifts and talents and what's in the way of using those natural gifts and talents of each person. So that's what,
yeah. So I'm wondering, would you see it that, how Sid would talk about the form and the formless are one? So let's leave the formless to one side, but this is a kind of blueprint for the form, just as if you see anything in nature, rocks take different formations, or
Yes,
different
yes,
types of, sea currents or sea behavior, but this is a sort of a description of the form, and the
energy.
form in the form of energy, so to speak. Yeah.
Right, and it's, we know that there are four, I'm not a physicist, but I know a little bit about physics. There are four principles in relativity. One is electromagnetics, one is the strong principle, and the weak principle, which have to do with how the nucleus of an atom attracts or repels. And then the last one is gravity. But people are skipping over electromagnetics. What about that? That's what this is. That's how we operate. So it's equally important to gravity. It's not less important than the principle of thought, the single paradigm of thought, which is very important. I mean, I'm not saying it's not important. I use that every day in my life. But if you don't know this, you're going to get a lot of wear and tear on your vehicle, and you're not going to. I mean, the people I know in human design have become more healthy as a result, because they're not wearing down their vehicle with resistance. I'm sorry to say this, but I don't see that when I look broadly across the people I've known for 25 years in the three principles. It's different. So, and it's also like I would have said before, I can get along with anyone. And I can get along with anyone. But do I want to, and is it good for me? That I never asked that. I never asked that. So now sometimes I ask that. And I discovered, no, it's not. So whatever. Anyway, I don't want to get too far off. Whatever.
We're approaching the end of our time, but I wonder if I could just ask you one more question, kind of related to that. So, just again, this thing that you've spoken about of the felt perception and the response in the body, and is that because you were describing to Marie how you sort of saw that it might operate with her, and does that vary for each of us, or
yes. The 50% of the population, like Marie, it's that calm between the emotional waves that's your inner knowing. So I don't even know if you could call that a felt perception in the body, that calm. Maybe. Sorry about my cat, but
it's fine.
So I would have to talk to more emotional people about that. I haven't gotten the sense that that's quote unquote a felt perception, although it is an absence of dissonance. It's an absence of that edge of anxiety. So I guess you could call it a felt perception, because if there's any nervousness or anxiety for that 50%, that's their cue that they should wait for the calm. But the three of us and my husband are all what's called a splenic projector, Lynn and Christian and me, and that is a felt perception of some sort. Now, there are a lot of different projectors and they feel things differently, but my husband gets kind of a gut feeling of sort of a little discomfort if he's going in the wrong direction. He just feels like, no, that doesn't feel right to me. And if he keeps going in that direction, he'll get GI symptoms. He'll get diarrhea, he'll start to have hemorrhoids, all that stuff, because he hasn't listened. He hasn't paid attention. I get more of I have a split definition that gets complicated, but I get more of a feeling of being able to breathe freely through my whole body rather than sort of having a constriction. So that's my feeling. And then you have to take some time to just experiment and see what your feeling is. And I don't know, Christian, if you have, in the month or so we've been talking, if you've been able to notice what's your yes or what's your no. Can you tell?
I couldn't describe it in bodily terms, but I have certainly, I know I've always had that. I have always. And I did have a very particular instance quite soon after our first in-depth conversation, where I was doing something which I knew was the wrong direction for me, and I just had an absolute certainty, I'm done with this, and I never need to do this kind of thing again. But
did you feel that in your body? I mean,
I didn't. It was a sort of. It was a kind of all-encompassing thing, but no, I suspect maybe there was something, but I wasn't aware. I really, so I think I would need to just look at that, or be open to that for a bit longer. And I love the fact that there's this idea of do an experiment, play with it, see what works. I love that.
You can't believe me; you have to try it. And another 35% of the population, which is not any of us, have a very clear sound that when you ask them a question, they have the ability to go uh-huh or uh-uh or mm-hmm or mm-mm, like a baby would. And they've been socialized, like my daughter. I managed to socialize my daughter out of using her sounds. She uses her words now. But we all do that as parents because we think that the sounds are her inner guidance. So she's learning how to use her sounds again. It's great. And she's an executive. But, I mean, it's whatever it takes, because otherwise you're drawn into especially if you're married, especially if you are close to your spouse, you're drawn into what they want to do and what they don't want to do. That's the first thing. If you're a parent, you're drawn into what's going on with your kids. It's so important to stay centered in our own energy. In order to be of service to anybody, you've got to be centered yourself. So I think sometimes we get so interested in helping other people that we forget that it's putting on your own oxygen mask first, taking care of yourself first. So
yeah.
Anyway, it's been lovely. I've really enjoyed talking with you all, and thank you for being here. It was great.
Oh, thank you. It's I mean, I really, really appreciate your time, and it's been another delightful conversation. And I just want to say thank you very much indeed. Thanks Lynn and Marie for joining us.
Thanks very much, Marsha. Thank you, Christian.
Oh, thank you.
Thank